John Bouwers, and I'm a church planter in Milton, Ontario, which is just to the west of Toronto. We are the fastest growing community in Canada for about a decade. My wife and I live on the north end of Milton, and my wife and I have been married for 36 years. We have 4 children and 2 grandchildren and 1 on the way. So I was always a kind of a technically minded person growing up, and I went to the University of Waterloo for mechanical engineering, and that was my passion. That's what I loved. I loved designing things. I loved the creative process. In my last year of university, while I was connected to campus ministry, a campus minister from a different university challenged me out of the blue, like a bolt from the blue, whether or not, in the subtlest of ways, but struck me in the heart, whether or not I should be considering going into ministry. And honestly, if there was a list of job descriptions, this would have been at the bottom. Like, who wants to be a pastor? You go to funerals all the time. This sounds really dark. But I couldn't shake it. And later on, when I remember actually challenging this campus minister using logic, and I realized my passion probably betrayed something, that it really hit me in the heart. But for about 10 years, I went ahead with my journey of being a mechanical engineer, worked for different companies, and eventually about 5 years into those 10 years, started my own business, and God just super blessed that. I also did a graduate work in mechanical engineering. One thing I distinctly remember was traveling from my home, or from the university, for an evening class every week, driving through the dark to come home at exactly the same place on that road. I just kept thinking about that question, and I could not shake it. Eventually, I remember going to, it was actually a Promise Keepers conference, and at one point in the conference, they brought all the pastors up front to be prayed for, and I knew in my heart, I think I'm supposed to be down there. And I remember wrestling with trying to talk to my wife about this call to ministry again. We talked about it a few times, and I remember distinctly traveling all the way on vacation, like 30 hours in the car, trying to bring up this topic I knew would change our lives, and I couldn't do it. Eventually, we sat down together, and she says, what's going on? And I said, I think I'm supposed to follow this call. And we sold our home and our business, and we moved to go to seminary. I really felt it was the Spirit continually just nudging me constantly. But I will not underestimate, and this is often, I think, part of this journey of call, I won't underestimate the courage it took to talk to someone who knew something about ministry. Said, am I crazy? And that was super helpful in my journey to sort of bounce it off someone, and them saying, hey, why don't we just go check it out, and go to the seminary, talk to some people. And in the end, it was probably somebody there when I went to visit the seminary who said to me, maybe you could kind of work at it part-time, keep doing engineering. But another person, it was Keith Tanis actually, who said, no, you're going to sell your house, you're going to move to Grand Rapids, and you're going to go to seminary. And I knew that it was correct. So don't underestimate the challenge that you might have that would make the difference in someone else responding to the call that they're working on in their hearts. I think for me, because in some ways it felt like I had another call, this work that I loved and appreciated, for me, the wrestling past that, this seems a more rational thing to keep doing than to do this. Once I've really sort of said, yes, this is where God's calling me, that sort of barrier was passed. And so since then, I think my journey in established church ministry for 10 years was wrestling with, beyond the tasks of established church ministry? What's this church thing supposed to be about? Is there a picture of what Christ desires a healthy body to look like, made up of these disciples, or somehow allowing their faith to give expression to how they live their whole lives, and having open lives to neighbors and to the ways that God might lead day by day? And certainly for me, that journey was in the busyness of my work, which was ministry. I found it was an easy cop-out to say, well, I'm too busy to relate to neighbor. And so in that journey, my own call to be present and available and to say yes to stuff maybe that I wouldn't have had before, those were really key missional changes in me. Certainly after the call to church planting, there is no denying that apart from prayer, apart from just continually leaning on God, when there just isn't always clear evidence that what you're doing is having an effect. So really continuing to lean on God. And then I guess, my own particular journey into church planting, I could say more about how that call came to be. In the established church, wrestling with that question, what's the church supposed to be? I think I definitely grew in openness to the person and the work of the Holy Spirit. This was all, for a church to be alive, it's through the work of the Holy Spirit. But my journey of being willing to try things, early on, maybe it's not such a radical thing today, but to run the Alpha course in, 20 years ago, was, what they will say at HTB Holy Trinity Brompton, who started the Alpha course, is that Alpha didn't make their church made Alpha. And what they mean by that is what Alpha is like, having a meal together, listening to a talk, and then engaging it, saying, I don't agree with this, or this is what I think, is what church should look like. And, that was a real conviction of, why isn't church like this? And I find a lot of people in Alpha say, why isn't church like this? Why isn't it where we can just kind of hang out and let our lives, our weekly engagements of life, start rubbing off each other, and this sort of natural life-on-life discipleship happen? In that journey, we reformatted our established church into, actually HTB does this as well, make their elder districts pastorates, meaning they're regionally located. And so we created this monthly rhythm of being together in community and asking, why are we Christians here? And that was really, for me, the precursor of reading about missional community and then wondering about, am I being called to church planting?